Hello everyone, and by everyone I mean all you Outer Wilds cultists that wish you could play the game again for the first time. Welcome in. So, I recorded this a few years ago, but I'm just getting around to editing it now. Before we start though, I need to give a few disclaimers. First, if you haven't played Outer Wilds before, stop watching this. This game is too special to spoil it for yourself. Go play it first, then you can come back and watch as many Outer Wilds videos as you want. Second, now this is a big screw up on my part, but I somehow managed to break my translator tool. May have been a bad install, or maybe I messed with config files that I shouldn't have. I'm still not entirely sure. Either way, the translator didn't work. My apologies if this makes you want to yell at your screen. Since then I've gone back and played the game properly and watched countless playthroughs on YouTube, so I know the feeling of screaming internally at the streamer butchering your favorite game. Finally, in another rookie mistake, I lost all the mic audio for these recordings, just completely unusable. I did realize my F-up pretty soon after I finished the game, so to try to salvage it, I immediately watched my footage back and recorded what's essentially a commentary track of my thoughts and what was going through my head at the time I played it. Now that it's been a few years, I'm going to finally stop procrastinating and tackle the absolute mountain of editing it's going to take to cut this down into something watchable. I hope it comes out okay. With all that out of the way, let's get to it. My last exploration resulted in a dead end at the Southern Observatory, so it was time to chase down a new lead. The only remaining thing I had that I learned at the village was to track down Gabbro on Giant Steep. So I went into my ship map, marked Giant Steep, and then blasted off to see if I could find Gabbro. And just narrowly avoided being destroyed by a meteor. The name of Giant Steep was quite literal. It is a gas giant, and from what I've learned from people at the village, it's apparently a water planet, so deep also makes sense. Flying by, I got a closer look at the space station that was orbiting around. Then I headed through the atmosphere, not quite sure what I was about to find. When I punched through, I was immediately smacked in the face by the sight of a watery planet with several cyclones swirling about. I flew my ship through the cyclones. Luckily, as I was flying through, Gabbro's island fell out of the sky right in front of me. So I stabilized myself and then brought the ship in for a landing. Gabbro's signal appeared to be coming from inside this cave, and once I walked over there, I found Gabbro laying in a hammock. Gabbro stated that they kept dying repeatedly, and asked me if it was me too. It appears we are not the only one that's aware of the time loop. Gabbro was pretty chill about the whole endeavor, and they also confirmed that no one else seems to know about the time loop's existence. Whenever they tell Hornfells, they think they're being metaphorical. Also, every time Gabbro dies, they see all their memories flash before them just like we do. Gabbro hypothesized that had to do with the statue it saw that opened its eyes, just like we did in the observatory. My conversation with Gabbro was cut tragically short by the supernova, so I exited out of the conversation to go get a better look. And then was promptly engulfed by the supernova. This kicked off the first of many times I would try to see Gabbro. It ended up being one of the most difficult things I had to do in this game. On the next loop I came back and headed in to see if I could find Gabbro, but I came in a little too hot. Yeah, not my best work, but any landing you can walk away from, right? I got out of my ship to go find Gabbro, and this is when I realized my landing may have been worse than I thought. Yikes. Better not tell anyone about this. Anyway, as bad of a landing that was, it was actually quite fortuitous, because it spit me out pretty much right near where Gabbro is, up by his campfire. So I walked down the path, pulled up my signal scope since I still hadn't identified Gabbro, and walked forward until it identified him. Resuming my conversation with Gabbro, I informed them that I learned something, and that I had found the quantum poem back on Timberhearth in the Quantum Grove. Then I asked them how they stay so calm in the face of impending death, and they offered to teach me how to meditate. I don't know what I was expecting when Gabbro said that it would be the next loop before I know it, but for some reason I wasn't expecting it to actually end the loop. So once again I woke up back by the campfire and had to go back again to try to finish my conversation with Gabbro. When I blasted off, I got a bit distracted by the sight of a moon in the sky that was definitely not the Outer Rock. It appeared to be a gas giant, gas dwarf maybe better, because it was kind of small. And when I tried to land on it, it straight up disappeared. I tried looking around, figuring out what the hell just happened, but yeah, pretty confused. Not the weirdest thing I've seen in the solar system, so moving on, back to Gabbro. After my disastrous landing, I decided that maybe some caution would be the better approach here, so I tried to slow myself down well before I got the giant steep. Then I kicked the ship over into landing mode and slowly made my descent into the gas giant. However, I overdid it a little bit on my cautious approach, and the space station orbiting Giant Steep had other plans for me. Yeah, not great, but you know what? We can recover this. My shipdog would later inform me that this space station is called the Orbital Probe Cannon. Since I was already up here and in a stable orbit, thanks to the collision, I took a look around the orbital probe cannon and found what appeared to be a landing pad. So I flew over to it and plopped the ship down. When I got out of the ship, it sent me straight down into a tunnel that ended in an airlock. And on the other side of the airlock was a central chamber with 3 branching pathways. This is where I learned to translate my first ever Know My Text, not because my translator worked, but because of the symbols on the wall. Even though I don't know how to read, I know the numbers 1, 2, and 3 when I see them. I headed down the tunnel labeled number 1 first, which led to another airlock. And once inside, it led me into what I would later discover is called the control module. This space was kind of trippy as it had gravity crystal floors on both the floor and ceiling, so gravity could be either way depending on where I was standing. I found a projection stone titled Launch Module, and when I placed it in the projection pool, it created a vision of something that looked very similar to the place I was in, except it was all broken. Based on the name of the projection stone, I inferred that this was the launch module, which the ship log would later confirm. I removed the projection stone and took it over to the wall, where it made some text appear. Which, yep, guess what? Still couldn't translate it. Big surprise. But next to the wall was a giant steep projection stone. When I inserted it in the indentation, it gave me a vision of the same place I had seen previously. Whatever this thing is, up in space. And then it fell through the clouds before crashing down into the water. Yeah, still not sure entirely what to make of this, but I figured this place is on Giant Steep, we'll probably explore it eventually. There was a pad on the ground that had 3 gravity crystals, and when I stepped on it, it flipped gravity over to the other side. On this side was a pool filled with gold liquid and a glowy ball in a pipe. I moved the glowy ball along until it slotted down into this first indentation. When I placed the ball in the first indentation, it brought up a projection of what I would later learn is ash twins sending a message to the orbital probe cannon, and then the orbital probe cannon rotating to a different trajectory. When I put the ball in the second indentation, it created a projection of the orbital probe cannon firing off the probe inside of it. This was the same exact probe that I had tracked down in an earlier loop. After the probe fired, the cannon broke apart, and one of the modules appeared to fall off the cannon and straight down. The final indentation created a projection that was a close-up of the orbital probe cannon, and I could see just how damaged it was after the launch. One of the modules did appear to be completely detached from the rest of the structure. After this, there was nothing left to see in this module, so I went back out the airlock to check out some of the other modules. I headed into the tunnel marked number 2, but when I went through there was a broken piece blocking my path. I was prompted to launch a scout, and when I did, I could see that there was a gigantic crack in the glass. This appeared to be the same module that I had just seen in the other projection pool. Since there was a crack in the glass, if I couldn't get in this way, I could probably get in from the outside. So I left my scout there to use as a waypoint, then headed back outside to see if I could get in through the crack. When I got out, my ship was still making annoying beeping noises, so to try to get that to stop, I decided to make some quick ship repairs. The electrical system was just out of reach and was kind of a pain in the ass to get to, but the beeping had stopped, so I decided, fuck it, good enough, and continued on towards my scout's waypoint. Luckily, the crack in the glass was big enough for me to fit through, so I went inside to see what I could see. My ship log informed me that this was the launch module, which was badly damaged but still had its projection pool intact. I picked up the projection stone for the control module, and when I inserted it, it showed me a projection of the module that I had just been in. And when I looked up, I saw the hologram that I had summoned, so that clued me in that these projections are actually showing what's happening in real time. It's not like a recorded vision of the past or anything. I also found another projection stone for the probe tracking module, which was the module marked number 3. In this image, I found a Know My statue with its eyes open, which was a bit strange, since Gabbro had just informed us that, statue with eyes open means time loop awareness, so maybe there's a third person out there that's aware of the time loop. Outside of the module, I could see mostly pitch black that was interrupted by crackling electricity. There was also this weird white brambly surface, so I thought originally maybe this is somewhere on Dark Bramble, but the ship log told me that the probe tracking module was actually somewhere underwater. And since we know the module fell down after the cannon broke apart during launch, it would make more sense if this probe tracking module fell into Giant's Deep. After that, I headed back inside the probe cannon to see if I could go down the path for the module number 3, because at this point I hadn't quite put together that the probe tracking module was gone. So when I went into the tunnel, sure enough, probe tracking module completely gone. This just spit me out into space. So that's everything done with the probe cannon that I could tell. So I headed back to the ship and decided to finally go back and finish talking to Gabbro. Yeah, that maneuver was completely on accident, but it was pretty damn cool. My ship was still a little beat up, so I stabilized my orbit along with the probe cannon so I could get out to make some quick ship repairs. And then I went back to Giant's Deep to try to find Gabbro. Luckily for me, when I penetrated the atmosphere, Gabbro's island was right in sight, so I put the ship down on the beach and then got out to go talk to Gabbro. Now that I could finally resume my conversation, I asked Gabbro what they're doing out here. They said they're exploring the solar system, same as we are, and that it's usually pretty calm and peaceful except when a cyclone comes by and launches them into space. I asked where I should explore on Giant's Deep. They recommended I check out the bright flash in the sky that happens at the start of every loop, and also going to check out Statue Island, which is the island where Gabbro first encountered the Know My statue that opened its eyes and the glowy business happened. To find it, I should look for 2 islands connected by a natural rock arch. Then I asked Gabbro what's up with the planet. They said it's made of mostly water, no surprises, and there's a strong current beneath the surface that prevents anything from sinking below it. Though Gabbro didn't test this theory extensively. And there's a total of 4 islands on Giant's Deep, including this one. Gabbro also warned me about the cyclones, which will toss anything in their path up in the air. It was at this point I realized how badly I had fucked up my poor ship. One of the landing gears was completely gone, but I guess that's why we have 3 of them. Doesn't appear that we needed that front one. I checked my ship log, and it updated with entries for the orbital probe cannon, the ocean depths, and Statue Island. The ocean depths have a current that prevents anything from sinking. And Statue Island is where Gabbro found the Know My statue. Now that I had a new lead, I decided to see if I could go track down the island Gabbro was talking about. Right after blasting off, I managed to find Gabbro's ship, but it didn't appear that I could get in this one either, just like Ryback's on Brittle Hollow. The first island I found appeared to be a piece of dark bramble, and given my experience in that planet, I decided to stay the fuck away from that for now. But luckily, when I turned around, I'd managed to find Statue Island. There was a gravity field on the beach that looked like a landing pad, so I set the ship down and got about to exploring. Gravity on Giant's Deep is really heavy, about twice as much as it is on Timberhearth, so using the jetpack to get around was mostly restricted to horizontal movements. Across the water, I found the statue with its eyes open that Gabbro had seen, as well as a broken door. On a path off to the side, there were gravity crystals, so I followed them to see where they led. The gravity crystal path wound its way up this solid rock face until eventually I came to the top. On the top of the island, there was more Nomai skeletons and what appeared to be some Nomai houses that had deteriorated over the ages. There were also pads on the ground that appeared to depict a tornado. I didn't see anything obvious to interact with at the house, so I decided to check out this archway that made a natural bridge across. And once I was on the other side, I found another Nomai teleporter pad. Unlike the other teleporters I had seen, there was some writing on the wall. And this appeared to be a white hole teleporter pad, so it was probably an exit and not an entrance. While I headed back to the destroyed Nomai house, a tornado got perilously close to the island, until it actually made contact with us and spit the entire island up into space. At this point, the glowing pads with the symbol of the tornado lit up, and like a moth to the flame, I headed towards it. When I got inside, it actually stabilized me in place until the island splashed back down safely into the water. So the Nomai must have used those as a countermeasure against the tornadoes to make sure they didn't die a violent death once they finally crashed back down into the waves. I tried putting my scout on the pad, but it didn't seem to do anything. And then when I walked back into the house, I noticed the floor was hollow and I was prompted to use my scout. From looking at the scout, I could see a mural on the wall, as well as another Nomai statue. On another section, there appeared to be another projection pool. And then when I launched my scout straight down, it appeared to go into the water. The weird thing was, when I took pictures, the scout appeared to completely go under and leave the island, so there must be a way in from the bottom if I were to go underwater. I jumped off the cliff and splashed into the ocean, then swam around while I looked for an entrance to the island's interior. Luckily, it didn't take me too long, and I was able to swim past the rocks and up into the center of the island. The first thing I found after coming up the beach was a door, which, when I opened it, just led to the front entrance where the broken door was before. Following the path around, I came to a small cave where it appeared that a Nomai had died while sculpting additional Nomai statues. And then I came to the Nomai statue and mural I had seen in the scout. This mural depicted a Nomai, a statue, and a Nomai sculpture that were all connected to each other by what looked like blue Wi-Fi signals. The signal went from the Nomai to the statue, then the statue to the sculpture, and then finally the sculpture back to the Nomai. At the very top, I found a projection stone for the Ash Twin. And when I plugged it into the projection pool, it showed me a vision that I had previously seen in the Mines on Timberhearth, with the glowing Nomai sculptures. This was the same sculpture that was in the mural I had just seen, and the same sculpture that appears to us every time we die. So, what that mural was appearing to show was how our consciousness is preserved through the time loop. Every time we die, our consciousness gets uploaded to the statue sends the consciousness over to this space, and then when we die, the sculpture sends our consciousness back to our body in the next loop. When I looked around, I could count 3 masks, one for me, one for Gabbro, and one for a mystery person. And then, as the supernova was happening, something weird happened. Something appeared to open up above me, and blue glowing light started flowing towards it from the sculptures. Based on the way light was bending around the object up there, I assumed that was gravitational lensing like we had seen on Brittle Hollow, and this was another black hole. Why would the Nomai be sending our consciousness into the black hole at the end of every time loop? Where was the space? How could I explore it? And would this finally be the key to discovering how to translate Nomai text? Spoiler alert, it wouldn't be, but a man can hope. On the next loop, I went back to Giant's Deep to see what else I could explore. Gabbro had mentioned there was 4 islands, and so far I'd only seen 2, which meant there were 2 more left for me to explore. I nearly got smacked by the orbital probe cannon again, but managed to get into Giant's Deep unscathed. And I immediately plunged into the ocean to check out the current that Gabbro had mentioned. It appeared that, yeah, I couldn't sink any further than this current, but more interestingly, I also saw a blue ball at the core that was teeming with electricity, and what appeared to be jellyfish around it. Surfing around the current brought me to Gabbro's island, as well as another island that I had yet to explore. So I parked the ship on the landing pad of the other island. A staircase led down inside the island, and on the other side was a space with more tornado pads, a dead Nomai skeleton, and a scroll. I can't remember what point in my playthrough I came up with this theory, but I thought maybe these scrolls were collectibles, and if I picked up enough of them, it would unlock my translator tool. But yeah, still no luck. There was also what appeared to be a 3D model of the orbital probe cannon next to the dead Nomai. I tried to go down one of the gravity crystal floor paths, but it was broken and I couldn't go any further, so I headed over to the other one. This path was still intact, and I was able to work my way over to these gigantic rings coated in gravity crystal floors. Hopping off the ring, I found another mural that looked like blueprints for the orbital probe cannon. Given that this place had a 3D model of the probe cannon and blueprints, when I looked up at the structure, it kind of reminded me of a dry dock for a shipyard, where they make repairs on ships. So I thought maybe this is the place where they designed and built the orbital probe cannon, which would make sense since it was orbiting Giant Steep. I also found a control module projection stone right as the island was lifted into space by a tornado, and it showed me a vision of the control module that I had just been up to. Interestingly enough, when I floated around on Giant Steep, I was also floating around the projection. So when I got out, I went to the safety of the tornado pad and waited for the island to crash back down. From this view, it was very obvious that this was the same exact place I had seen in the other Giant Steep projection stones. I also noticed there appeared to be more stuff on the other side of the structure, so I climbed up the rings and went around to the other side. This was a bit disorienting, but thankfully I don't get motion sick very easy, so it wasn't that big of a deal. On the other side of the structure, I found a brittle hollow projection stone next to a dead Nomai. When I put the projection stone in the pool, it showed me a vision of the Southern Observatory. And then, looking at the tornadoes in the Southern Observatory reminded me that I discovered that some tornadoes shoot you up while some tornadoes shoot you down. So I immediately headed back to the ship to go play with the tornadoes on Giant Steep. I blasted off, and luckily the tornadoes were directly behind me, so I flew directly into the first tornado I could find, and sure enough, it launched me straight up into the air just like it had with the islands. Not gonna lie, that was kind of fun, so I immediately flew into another tornado. And this one also sent me spinning directly up into space. Now, I could do this all day, but it wouldn't be very productive, so instead I decided to use my scout to shoot in the tornadoes to see what would happen. And luckily on my first try, I happened to find one that shot the scout down. And the scout appeared to go straight through the current and headed towards the electric ball at the core of Giant Steep. So I flew my ship in, and yeah, sure enough, it sent me down below the current into the ocean depths. The music changed down here, and it was very peaceful. I took the ship down by the electric core to explore and noticed a jellyfish appearing to come out of it. So I decided to try to go inside, and was promptly shocked, damaging my electrical system. Quick to learn my lesson, I decided to use my scout to test things instead so I didn't take any further damage. And when I shot my scout at the surface, it bounced off the electric field and went hurtling back towards the surface of the planet. Okay, I guess we're not meant to go by the electric core. It also looked like the jellyfish were coated in electricity just like the core, so I decided to shoot the scout at the jellyfish to see if it would also shock me, and yeah, it does. No matter what part of the jellyfish I launched my scout at, it always seemed to bounce off. So I knew if I touched that jellyfish, I would get shocked, my ship would be damaged, and maybe even blow up. So I decided, yeah, probably not the best idea right now. I orbited around the core for a little longer, looking for a way in, but didn't find anything, so I headed back up to the surface. I went to check my ship log, but yeah, no electricity, not gonna work. So I got out of the ship to make some repairs, and you'd think repairing the ship in water wouldn't be as hard as repairing it in space, but the ship bobbing up and down in the water made this much more difficult than it had to be. But eventually I got it done. After repairing the electrical system, I was able to look at the ship log, which updated the log for the ocean depths to state that the core of Giant's Deep is surrounded by electricity. This reminded me of the projection of the probe tracking module that I saw up in the orbital probe cannon, and since the probe tracking module appeared to fall straight down into Giant's Deep underwater, it stood to reason that the probe tracking module could probably be found inside that electrical core, if only we could get inside. After that, I went looking for the last island that I had yet to explore, the one that looked like a scary piece of dark bramble. Once I found the island, there appeared to be a nice landing spot, so I set the ship down and reluctantly went to go out and see what I could see. Hopefully not any anglerfish. When I walked towards a hollow vine, my suit prompted me that there was ghost matter nearby, so I sent out the scout to see where it was, then switched to photo mode, and it appeared the ghost matter was only on the branching path to the right, while the path to the left was clear. So I went down the path to the left and jumped over a couple chasms. Still no ghost matter to be found. And finally, I arrived at a large icy platform that was absolutely coated in ghost matter. It appeared that the left branch was still the safe spot, so I went to go over that way. And just as I got to things that looked interesting, a tornado came and launched the island up into space. I saw a tape recorder on the ground and tried to interact with it, but it wouldn't let me so long as I was flying around in space. Interestingly enough, I was able to refuel my jetpack, and even weirder, I was able to roast a marshmallow at the campfire while floating in 0G. And even stranger still, apparently campfires work perfectly fine underwater. We've got waterproof campfires, trees that just emanate oxygen around them. Physics is a bit weird in this universe. After I got my marshmallow cooked to a nice golden brown, I got up, and this time I was able to listen to the tape recorder. It was a log from Feldspar, and they stated that they managed to get all the way down to the core of Giant's Deep, which coincidentally is exactly where I was trying to get to. Feldspar was surprised I didn't get electrocuted in the effort, and they reflected that brute force isn't always the answer. Finally, Feldspar noted that they were heading off to Dark Bramble. I wasn't quite sure what they meant by brute force wasn't the answer, but at a minimum I figured that continuing to ram myself into the electrical core was probably not the right idea. I went to leave, but because of the confusion with the tornado, I forgot which path was safe and walked headlong into a patch of ghost matter and promptly died. On the next loop, I went to check out my ship log, and it gave me an update for the Dark Bramble Island, noting that the island consisted of thorny vines and frozen jellyfish, and it's where Feldspar camped before they headed to Dark Bramble. This entry led into the note for Feldspar, which meant that if I wanted any more information about how to get to the core of Giant's Deep, I was going to have to track down Feldspar on Dark Bramble. And let me tell you, at this point there was not a chance in hell I was going back to Dark Bramble and dealing with those anglerfish. So once again, my leads were at a dead end.